Sonic CD is definitely one of the more interesting Sonic games for many reasons, and a big one of those reasons is that it was developed at the same time as Sonic 2 by the Japanese Sonic team, while STI worked on Sonic 2 from the US. However, there wasn't much communication between the two developers at the time, which led to Sonic 2 and Sonic CD trying to expand upon Sonic 1 very differently. Sonic 2 ended up focusing a lot more on the speed and physics side of things, and this ended up becoming the classic Sonic formula going forward. While Sonic CD ended up sharing a lot more similarities with Sonic 1, and really made some questionable design choices with that in mind. In a way, this means that Sonic CD is sort of a glimpse into the world of what Sonic 2 could have been. The most obvious similarities with Sonic 1 being that Sonic's sprite is unchanged from that game, and there are also 3 acts per zone again. But just because this game isn't Sonic 2 doesn't instantly make it bad. Sonic CD definitely has some redeeming qualities and very unique features. So, without further ado, let's talk about the game itself. Straight off the bat, we can indeed confirm that this is a classic Sonic game. Sonic's movement and physics is exactly how you'd expect a classic Sonic game to feel, but there are some minor adjustments to Sonic's moveset that does alter the playing experience very slightly. Sonic has a new move called the Super Peel Out, which is basically just another spin dash which charges much faster. This can be done for a quick burst of speed, but can also leave Sonic vulnerable to hits as he won't be in his ball form like in the spin dash. Speaking of the spin dash, the Sonic CD team clearly had the same idea as the Sonic 2 team with introducing the spin dash to Sonic's moveset, but as the two teams clearly weren't really communicating very much, the spin dash ends up being slightly different between the two games. Sonic 2 has a spin dash we all know and love. Hold down and tap the jump button multiple times to rev up your charge before releasing. Sonic CD's spin dash, on the other hand, just needs the player to hold the jump button to charge up speed. And also, there's not really any animation for the spin dash either. Sonic kinda just rolls up in his normal ball form, which does look a bit weird. Luckily, with modern releases of the game, the option to switch between the two spin dashes is always there, so this isn't really a problem. Most people prefer the standard spin dash from Sonic 2 and the rest of the games, but I can't really say I mind using the CD one. Speaking of modern releases, I want to talk about what version of the game I'll be playing for this video and what version I would recommend anybody interested in playing the game should be using. Firstly, anybody playing the original classic Sonic games, just don't. All of these games, including CD, have been given much better versions through official remakes, which add vital features such as widescreen, better physics, additional characters, and they generally just run much better on modern platforms. In this video, I've been playing Sonic CD Miracle Edition, which is an enhancement mod for Sonic CD on PC, adding a multitude of useful settings and customization to the game. This version also adds a Super Sonic equivalent called Miracle Sonic, which can be activated when you collect the 7 time stones, which is a pretty cool addition. However, you can always turn this off in the settings if it isn't your thing. I highly recommend this mod as the definitive version of Sonic CD. The options added really allow you to create the exact Sonic experience you want, such as adding the drop dash and other Sonic abilities from future games, but I'm sure I'll get into some of the other features of the mod later in the video. If you're interested, I'll leave a link to the mod in the description. For anyone wanting to play the game who doesn't have a PC, Sonic Origins is a perfectly fine way to experience all the classic Sonic games, adding widescreen and all the other bells and whistles of being a modern release. It just means you won't have as much customization for your experience. Your average playthrough of Sonic CD, if you want to just run through and beat the game as fast as possible without getting the good ending, will probably leave you pretty disappointed, as a normal playthrough of this game is by far the weakest of all the original Sonic games. Well, why is that? The game looks fine and plays and controls exactly like a classic Sonic game should. While this is true, it's in the level design where Sonic CD falls short of the rest of the pack. See, Sonic 2, for example, is mostly focused on being a high-speed platformer, rewarding the use of speed and momentum with faster times to beat levels. You know, how a Sonic game should be. Whereas CD, in my opinion, is much more focused on creating levels which Sonic can explore and platform in. This makes a normal playthrough of CD quite underwhelming, as there's too many levels that are more likely to leave you confused or just bouncing around uncontrollably. This doesn't mean there aren't zones that are fun to speed through in this game. Palm Tree Panic is a pretty decent Green Hill clone. Tidal Tempest is actually a really good water level with really great music. Quartz Quadrant is probably my favourite zone in the game. You can use these conveyor belts to get around the level really quickly, and they're actually really fun to use. I guess Stardust Speedway is okay in a normal playthrough, but it's very overrated in my opinion, and it definitely has its own problems. But we'll talk more about that later. Well then, you might be wondering, why are the levels designed this way? Well, it's all to do with the time travelling mechanic. As you may have noticed, dotted around the levels are past and future signs. Running past one will activate it and allow Sonic to time travel to that time period. The zones will change depending on what time period you're in, and not just in aesthetic, but the actual layout of the level too. See, one of the playthroughs intended to get the good ending requires Sonic to travel to the past and break a robot generator to create a good future for that zone. This means that each act in the game has 4 different versions, including the past, present, bad future and good future. Which, don't get me wrong, is very ambitious and must have taken a lot of work to achieve, but this only sounds amazing, as unfortunately the execution of this idea in gameplay is just not great at all. The main problem I had at first with this is the fact that it meant for the first 2 acts of every zone, I had to stop in my tracks and search for this robot generator. I've honestly never been a fan of exploration in Sonic games, but I did give it a try for the sake of this video, and weirdly enough, I'd be lying if I said I didn't find some enjoyment with this playstyle. Once you get past the idea of this being a Sonic game where you must go fast all the time, and just appreciate the game for what it's trying to do differently, this can be a fun way to play the game. The process of finding a pass sign and finding somewhere to build up speed to time travel can be a decent challenge, but only when done right. For example, there's this really great part of Metallic Madness Act 2 where you're rewarded for some really challenging vertical platforming to access the top route of the level. The sign is right next to a little speed trap, which makes time travelling really easy, meaning all that's left to do is to find the generator. Doing this type of playthrough really allowed me to actually enjoy the actual time travel aspect of the game as well, because before I would only ever see levels in the present and only the past or future by mistakenly time travelling during a normal playthrough. But here, I actually saw a good future for every zone in the game, and I've never seen that before now. The different time periods and their aesthetics genuinely look amazing at times, and the zone's music slightly changing to fit the different time periods really fits it well as well. Unfortunately, this enjoyment didn't exactly last very long. I started seeing problems trying to build up speed to time travel in Quartz Quadrant. For some reason, these slopes were just killing my momentum and any chance of me time travelling every time I tried. The amount of time you need to move at speed to time travel seems far too long, and in some cases, the levels just aren't built to keep you moving for that long, meaning that simply using a pass sign can become extremely tedious and annoying. As well as this, if you lose your speed while attempting to time travel, you'll lose your chance to time travel, and the sign you tried before will no longer be available until you restart the level. Luckily, the Miracle Edition has an option for time travel posts to become reusable. Unluckily for me, I didn't notice that until after my playthrough. Miracle Edition also has a time travel overhaul option, which I actually did try out briefly. This removes the loading screen between time travel and makes the time you need to move at speed a lot shorter than originally required. However, I personally didn't really like this setting, as I couldn't time travel while rolled up in a ball, which I found to be a bit strange. But hey, if you want to try this out for yourself, this can be an excellent way to enhance the time travel for you and possibly make it an easier process. Another problem with the time travel run is that there are no generators hidden in the future versions of acts, rendering time travel to the future completely useless. Another big problem arises in Wacky Workbench, and oh my god, this is easily the worst Sonic zone of all time. The main gimmick of this stage is the floor bouncing Sonic extremely high towards the top of the level, and genuinely just looking ugly as f***. This level isn't even great going through in a normal playthrough, because of the bouncy floor making Sonic fly uncontrollably all over the place, but my god, this level is hell when looking for the generator. I must have spent an entire hour in Act 1 alone searching for it. I've always found exploration difficult in 2D Sonic games. I personally find it extremely difficult to map out the level in my head as I go through. So you can imagine when you're being bounced around like this constantly and the entire level just looks the same, it's even worse. After about an hour of searching and getting really aggravated, I swallowed my pride and looked up a guide to see where it was. And my god, the placement of this generator had me absolutely blown away. So you see this piston that usually crushes you in all Sonic games. You know, the piston that if you get anywhere near to its hitbox, it will crush you and instantly kill you. Well, you gotta get atop of that thing, get pushed into a tube in the wall, and then there's your generator. This is surely Sonic Team game design in its absolute purest form. The worst part is, there's 5 more generators still to destroy after this level, and they're not too hard or anything, but the game has just absolutely crushed your heart and soul at this point. I don't see how anyone can honestly say they enjoy doing this kind of playthrough. Another example of this questionable level design is in Stardust Speedway. Firstly, I know this zone is very popular amongst most Sonic fans, and at first glance you can understand why. The zone's aesthetic is really nice to look at in all the different time periods, and the race against Metal Sonic is actually a really great idea. However, this level has a really bizarre gimmick that can really confuse the player and stunt the pacing massively. See, in most Sonic games there are 2 background layers which the developers cleverly switch between to mix up a level. The best way to explain this is with the famous Sonic loop. You might wonder how Sonic is able to go through the loop without just running straight past it. Well, basically, when running up the loop, let's say Sonic is in background layer A, and when reaching the very top, the game switches the layers to layer B, making Sonic able to come back down and complete the loop. The developers use this all the time in classic Sonic games, and once you're aware of it, it's really obvious how much they utilise this technique. The reason this is important for me to explain is because Stardust Speedway actually tries to turn this feature into a mechanic that the player can interact with and manipulate. The problem with this is that it's not communicated to the player at all. Even I wasn't aware of the background layers mechanic before making this video, so you can expect the average player to have absolutely no clue when they seemingly come to a dead end and have no idea how to get past it. Well, what you're actually meant to do is change between the 2 layers with these blue sphere signs that are scattered around the level. But how could you ever know that interacting with these things changes anything in a casual run through, especially when the sign indicates no change at all when interacted with? Which one would you like? The blue sphere or the blue sphere? It's such a questionable design choice to make, especially when you don't communicate the mechanics of this feature to the player at all. Luckily though, this game is actually unique in that there are actually 2 methods of getting the good ending, if you are the type of player that is compelled to get them. And this second method, in my opinion, is much more easy and fun than the time travelling method. Again, similarly to Sonic 1, if you bring 50 rings to the end of an act, you can jump into a big ring to access a special stage. Contrary to what I think is the popular opinion, I actually really like these special stages. I don't think this is too groundbreaking to say as the competition isn't exactly fierce, but I think these are actually the second best special stages out of the classic games, only behind Mania. Basically, Sonic is in this 3D arena and has to destroy all the UFOs before the time runs out. If you touch the water in the level, you'll start losing time rapidly and be kicked out of the stage. If you do destroy all the UFOs, you get a time stone. Get 7 time stones to get the good ending. I do genuinely believe this is a lot better than the time travel run. I actually really love the challenge of trying to bring 50 rings to the end of an act. It's all about trying to balance speed with not getting hit. To be honest, I really enjoyed it in Sonic 1 and I really enjoy it here. I know it's not to everyone's taste though, and I can understand that. The bosses in this game are also pretty bad, which I guess is somewhat expected of Sonic games at this point. A lot of them just harbour the same problems as before. They either go down way too easily, or they just take way too long and massively harm the pacing of the game. The boss of Collision Chaos is literally just a massive pinball machine. I don't get the obsession with casino or pinball levels in Sonic games. Being bounced around uncontrollably like this isn't exactly very fun for me. It's not even as if it's a challenging boss, it can just take ages to get to the top sometimes, and is always just a bit of a slog to get through. As I mentioned earlier, the race with Metal Sonic is a really cool idea, but as is becoming a bit of a theme with this game, wasn't executed well at all. It's just a bit janky and doesn't really feel like a race at all, more like you're just avoiding his attacks until you get to the end. You don't even attack him back, he just runs into a wall and dies. It's definitely not the worst boss fight in the world, but I do think it's a very overrated fight in my opinion. So yeah, ultimately the best way to play this game is just by blitzing through and getting the bad ending. And this can be an okay experience, but doesn't come close to the other games because of the weak level design. Saying this though, CD does have some other things going for it that lifts it up just that little bit more. For one, you know how much I like my Sonic music, and the music here is absolutely head and shoulders above the rest of the classic games, and probably even the whole series if I'm honest. I don't know how they did it, but they just cooked up some honestly really amazing music for this game, and the fact there's 4 different songs for each zone is even more impressive. Even more impressive is the fact that there's 2 soundtracks for this game. There's the Japanese/European soundtrack, and the US soundtrack made later for the US release of the game. I personally think the Japanese/European soundtrack is much better, but modern releases of the game do allow you to choose between the 2, which is always great. I'm gonna have to share some of my favourite tracks from the game. I promise I won't do this every video, but honestly, just listen to these. And finally, this is my personal favourite of them all. Another thing that's great about CD are the animated cutscenes. Even though Mania popularised this in 2D Sonic and Origins later injected them into the older games, CD was the first to feature animated cutscenes at the start and end of the game. And these cutscenes are just amazing. One of my first exposures to Sonic was actually through the Sonic CD intro. I must have been like 7 years old at the time playing Sonic Gems Collection and just found the video on there. I ended up just watching it over and over again, just in awe of how cool I thought Sonic was. And even today, it's hard to say that these animations don't bring classic Sonic to life in a really efficient way. He's cool and determined, but also a bit cocky in the way he carries himself. This was all communicated without him saying a single word of dialogue. These are very cool cutscenes that are really just the embodiment of classic Sonic, and the intro is definitely really nostalgic for me. So that's Sonic CD. It's a game with great ideas, just bogged down by terrible execution and level design, which ultimately does make it the worst of the classic Sonic games, at least in my opinion. I'd actually really love to see some sort of time travel mechanic return to a 2D Sonic game, even if it's radically different from the original idea here. Next time we'll be talking about Sonic 3K, the final game of the classic era. So until then, I'll see you later.